What is up, guys? Today I've got a really janky deck for you. We are using banding. This is a super old mechanic in Magic that they stopped using because people found it overly confusing. But today we're going to try and make banding work in Commander. We're going to see how best we can utilize it, and I hope you enjoyed the deck tech. First off, what is banding? Banding is an old keyword that was placed onto creatures way back in the day, and it allows you to combine attackers. Similar to how you combine blockers when you want to block a bigger creature, this allows you to combine attackers to attack in a group instead. And how does this work? When you go to combat, you then can group any number of creatures together that have banding plus one additional creature that doesn't have banding. They are still all separate creatures, so they are separate permanents that can be targeted, but the big upside here is you are in control of how damage works in combat. So to clarify, if we start off with a Banalish Infantry, a 3-mana 1/3 human soldier with banding, and say a Mentor of the Meek, a 3-mana 2/2 human soldier, when we attack, we can use the banding ability on Banalish Infantry to group them together to form a band of attackers. Then our opponents go to blockers, they declare their blocker, which is blocking our band. But the big upside here with the band is when you have a band that is attacking and becomes blocked, they are blocked as an individual object instead of different creatures. So the entire band becomes blocked. However, you then decide how combat damage is assigned. You choose how your attackers separate damage to the blockers, and then you also choose how the blocker does damage to your band of attackers. So in this case, we have the Banalish Infantry and the Mentor of the Meek. They attack in a band. Let's say an Eldrazi Displacer is declared as a blocker by our opponent. Eldrazi Displacer is a 3/3, and then we choose how the 3 damage from the Eldrazi Displacer is distributed to our band of attackers. In this case, we can then assign 2 of the Eldrazi Displacer's damage to the Banalish Infantry and 1 damage to the Mentor of the Meek, so both of ours will live and the Eldrazi Displacer will die. So it's a huge upside to winning combats when you attack in a band because you choose how the blocker's damage is separated. If we look in the reverse, so we are being attacked, you can't band when you are blocking. However, banding is still usable when blocking. So you can group up your blockers like you normally would be able to, but if you group your blockers and you have a creature with banding in the group of blockers, you then decide how the attacker's damage is distributed amongst your blockers, similarly to when we were attacking with a band. So it gives you tons of control over how damage is spread during combat, which is really fantastic, and it allows you to win a lot of combats when you wouldn't otherwise win them. Which commander are we using to do this banding mechanic? We are of course using Soraya the Falconer. This is a mono white deck. It is a really old, interesting card. It has been errated, so all falcons get +1/+1 is now all birds get +1/+1, and you can pay 1 and a white to give target bird banding until end of turn. I love the flavor here. It's such a cool card. It's a human who's a falconer. He's sitting in a field and he's commanding these bands of birds to attack your enemies. It's really great flavor. Such a cool card. We do want some more additional banding support in the deck so we don't only rely on our commander for this effect. So I've got cards like Formation, which is a 1 and a white instant that gives a creature banding until end of turn and you draw a card at the next upkeep. There's Baton of Morale, which is a 2-cost artifact, and then you can pay 2 to give a creature banding, so it's a backup for our commander. And Cooperation, which is a 2 and a white aura that gives the enchanted creature banding. We also have Helm of Chatsuk, 1 mana artifact that says pay 1 and tap it to give a creature banding till end of turn. That's a fantastic rate. It works really well in combination with the commander. And then out of all the creatures that actually give banding, I thought only 2 were worth playing in this deck. And this is Acacian Skirmishers and Knights of Thorn. Acacian Skirmishers is a 3 and a white human soldier 1/1. It has banding and first strike, but it has another interesting ability where all creatures that band with Acacian Skirmishers also gain first strike until end of turn. So your band then gains first strike because normally those keywords don't distribute to your other creatures. They are still separate creatures. And then Knights of Thorn is a 3 and a white 2/2 human knight with banding and protection from red. And I'll get into protection a little bit later because protection is a really weird, interesting situation when it works with banding, and I'll explain exactly why a little bit later on. So what creatures are we banding together? Well, with Soraya as our commander, we want to play lots of birds. We are in a mono-white bird tribal with banding support. There aren't a whole lot of birds in the game of Magic, but there's a decent amount in white, and some of them are really good. For example, Aven Mind Sensor is played a ton in the format. 3 mana 2/1 flash flying bird. And if an opponent would search a library, they search the top 4 instead. It can really screw over opponents who are trying to tutor or search for lands. Aetherstorm Rock is a great fit. It's a 4 mana 3/3 bird with flying. Whenever Aetherstorm Rock or another creature enters under your control, you get an energy. And whenever it attacks, you may pay 2 energy to put a +1/+1 counter on it, and you tap up to 1 target creature defending player controls. A little bit more control in combat. And then Skyboon Evangelist is a 4 and a white 3/3 bird advisor with flying, and when it enters, supports 6. So we put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 6 other target creatures. Really fantastic. And whenever a creature with a counter on it attacks one of your opponents, it gains flying until end of turn. So the few creatures we have in the deck without flying, we can give flying. We also have Soul Catcher, which is a 2 mana 1/1 bird with flying. Whenever a creature dies, it gets a +1/+1 counter, so it'll grow over the course of the game. Gustcloak Savior, which is 4 and a white 3/4 flying bird soldier. Whenever a creature you control becomes blocked, you may untap that creature and remove it from combat. This is a really weird one because if we give another bird banding and we attack in a band with Gustcloak Savior and the other creature with banding, they form a band. Then when that band becomes blocked, we can use Gustcloak Savior's ability to remove Gustcloak Savior from combat. That other creature is still declared as being in a band, so you still decide how the damage is spread. If we remove the creature with banding in the band, then the band will disassemble and we no longer have control over how damage is spread. So you have to be careful using this one, but it is a really great card anyway. And then Wingmate Rock is 3 white white bird 3/4 with flying. When it enters the battlefield, if you attacked with a creature this turn, create a 3/4 white bird creature token with flying. This is fantastic. We want to be attacking with flying birds and bands of birds all the time in this deck, so this will almost always give us an extra 3/4. And whenever it attacks, you gain 1 life for each attacking creature. Really great fit. The fact that it's spitting out a token is also fantastic. We've got a bunch of support for flying bird tokens in this deck. Cards like Emeria Angel, which is a 4 mana angel with flying, and when a land enters under your control, you make a 1/1 white bird with flying. Scour the Desert is a 5 mana sorcery, exile target creature card from your graveyard, and you create X 1/1 white bird creature tokens with flying, where X is the exiled card's toughness. It can make a whole bunch of birds out of nowhere. And then Nesting Dovehawk, a new card from March of the Machine Commander, is a 3 and a white 2/2 bird with flying. At the beginning of combat on your turn, populate, so it's fitting into the token theme. And whenever a creature token enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on it so it grows as you make tokens as well. And then there's a few really weird ones that work really nicely with banding. For example, Commander Isha, Duskrider Falcon, and Freewind Falcon. So these are all birds that have flying and they've got protection of some sort. Commander Isha has protection from creatures, Duskrider Falcon has protection from black, and Freewind Falcon has protection from red. So how does protection work with banding? If you attack in a band and one of these creatures is in the band, your opponents, because they are separate creatures, even though they are declared as in a band, your opponent can still choose to block the creatures in the band without protection. However, when damage is assigned, you choose how the damage is assigned, and you just put all the damage onto the protection creature, which will severely reduce how much damage your other creatures are taking, if any at all. So it works really well as an additional bonus to the banding mechanic because we are preventing even more damage to our creatures in combat. In terms of card draw and ramp, there's a couple of really great includes in this deck. Mono White has been getting a ton of support in these two departments as of late. For card draw, there's Welcoming Vampire, Tercasia's Welcome, and Mentor of the Meek. We are going to be making small creatures and token creatures quite often in this deck, so these will almost always trigger when we need them to. We also have Love Song of Night and Day, which is a 3 mana saga. And the first chapter is you and target opponent each draw 2 cards. Second chapter is make a 1/1 bird with flying. And third chapter is put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures. So it's drawing us cards, it's making a bird, and it's buffing a little bit. But this got me thinking that because it's a mono white deck that is doing a really janky thing, it isn't that powerful, we can use politics and try and bargain with our opponents to gain favor so that they don't attack us or see us as a threat, and making ourselves and an opponent draw cards politically can be really helpful. So we've also got Secret Rendezvous and Cut a Deal, which draws opponents' cards, but we also get a lot of cards off of them. In terms of ramp, there's a bunch of mana rocks which fit really well in a mono white deck. But also we've got a Ketra's Monument, a 3-cost legendary artifact that makes our white creatures cost 1 less to cast. There are 36 creatures in the deck, so that will come into play quite heavily. And whenever we cast a creature spell, we make a 1/1 white warrior creature token with vigilance. It's great fitting into the token theme as well. And then there's 2 birds that ramp as well. These are Scouting Hawk, which is a 3-mana 1/1 flying, and when it enters, if an opponent controls more lands than you search for a basic plains into play tapped. And Cartographer's Hawk is a 2-mana 2/1 flying bird, and when it does damage to an opponent who controls more lands than you return it to your hand, and then you search for a plains into play tapped. So these can ramp us, and they are flying birds as well. Really great fits. In terms of removal, there are quite a few birds that actually have removal stapled onto them, such as Avon Cloud Chaser Eagle, and Cloud Chaser Kestrel. These are all flying birds that when they enter, they destroy an enchantment. So enchantments shouldn't be an issue for us in this deck. We also have Lieutenant Carr, a 3-mana 2/2 flying bird soldier legendary, and we can pay 1 and a white and sacrifice it to exile target attacking creature. It's really great to disincentivize attacks from our opponents. Major Terror is a great one. I love this card. It's a really old, interesting card. It's a 4-mana flying bird soldier, 2/3. We can pay 3 white and sacrifice it to exile all black creatures. So if our opponents are playing a lot of black at the table, we can use this to totally blow them out. And Aerial Extortionist is a fantastic include, 3 white 4/3 bird soldier with flying, and when it enters or deals damage to a player, exile up to 1 target non-land permanent. For as long as it remains exiled, its owner may cast it. So this is a repeatable exile on permanents. Our opponents may recast them if they choose, and whenever another player casts a spell from anywhere other than their hand, draw a card. So it is removal and card draw stapled on a bird. Fantastic. In terms of board clears, I've got 3 which I think fit really well with this theme. We've got Austere Command because the modal aspect allows us to benefit ourselves the most. Dusk and Dawn is great because the Dusk side destroys all creatures with power 3 or greater. We don't have a lot of high power creatures in the deck, so it'll often be a one-sided board wipe. And the Dawn side with Aftermath brings all the 2 or less power creatures from our graveyard back to our hand, which is great because we do have a lot of low power birds in this deck. And then Ravnica at War, 4-mana sorcery, exile all multicolored permanents. Really fantastic include in a mono white deck. In terms of protection, there are a couple of things that fit exactly the theme we are doing. For example, Avon Liberator is a 4-mana 2/3 flying bird soldier, and it has morph, so you can morph it for 3 and then pay 3 and a white to flip it face up. And when Avon Liberator is turned face up, target creature you control gains protection from the color of your choice until end of turn. So it's a one-shot bird with a protection effect. We have Saphara Sky's Blade, a 7-mana 7/7 angel with flying and lifelink that gives other creatures that we control with flying indestructible, which is absolutely fantastic. And we can cheat it out by paying a white and tapping 4 untapped creatures with flying instead of paying 7. Really, really good include. And then fitting into the protecting our board, but also the little bit of politics, making us and an opponent draw cards. We have Your Temple is under attack, 3-mana instant. Creatures you control gain indestructible till end of turn, or you and target opponent each draw 3 cards. We have Rootborn Defenses, which is also giving our board indestructible and it populates. Unbreakable Formation gives our board indestructible. We can also buff our creatures using this. And then we've got Celestial Gatekeeper, which is a 5-mana 2/2 bird with flying, and when it dies, we can exile it to resurrect 2 birds or clerics from the graveyard to play, so really great resurrection effect on a bird. But how do we actually win them in this deck? We win through combat damage. We've got a couple of great board buff cards in the deck, such as Avon Brigadier. It's a 3 white bird soldier 3/5 with flying. All other birds get +1/+1. All other soldiers get +1/+1. There are a lot of birds in the deck that are soldiers as well, so this is a double anthem for those. It does buff our opponent's birds and soldiers as well, but birds aren't a particularly popular tribe in the format. There are some soldiers that are quite popular, but I don't see this being relevant that much. We also have Kangi's Lieutenant, 3-mana 1/1 flying bird soldier. When it attacks, attacking creatures with flying get +1/+1 until end of turn, and it has Encore for 6, which means when we Encore it, we get 3 of them, so we get +3/+3 on our flying creatures that are attacking. And Steel Plume Marshal is a 5-mana 3/3 bird soldier with flying, and when it attacks other attacking creatures you control with flying, get +2/+2 until end of turn. Really great buff effects. We have Windbrisk Raptor, a 7-mana 5/7 flying, attacking creatures you control have lifelink. Really great bird for gaining some life in a desperate situation. We have Soulcatcher's Eerie, a 2-mana enchantment. Whenever a bird is put into your graveyard from play, put a feather counter on Soulcatcher's Eerie. All birds get +1/+1 for each feather counter on Soulcatcher's Eerie. So if we've got a big board and we play Soulcatcher's Eerie and the board gets Wrath, we then get a ton of feather counters on the Soulcatcher's Eerie, which we then, when we rebuild after the Wrath, our birds will all be really, really big, really good include. And Makindi Stampede, 5-mana sorcery that gives our creatures +2/+2 until end of turn. It is an MDFC, which is a nice added bonus. Essentially, we want to be making bird tokens or casting birds. We then are going to be giving them banding to attack in bands. It's very important we attack the correct opponents, because if we give a bird banding and band it with something that doesn't have flying, then a non-flying blocker can block our entire band, so we have to be careful with that. But if we are careful with how we band, who we attack, and who we politically communicate with, I think this deck can do a lot of work. It looks like a ton of fun. I haven't built this in paper. I'm considering it, but that's it for today, guys. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the deck tech. Consider this for yourself if you want to build it. There are a few reserved list cards on this list, so they might go up in price over time. So if you are interested, I'd recommend picking up 1 or 2 of these now. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.